on the Thrive Time Show. Today we interview Hans von Spakovsky. Again, that's Hans von Spakovsky. And on today's show, he shares with us how his parents actually first met in a refugee camp in Nazi Germany. And he also shares why, as Americans, we simply cannot allow the 2020 elections to be hijacked by a bunch of socialists and communists masquerading as Democrats. All this and more on today's edition of the Thrive Time Show on your radio and podcast download.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we are interviewing the man, the myth, and the legend. You see, this guy is a former member of the Federal Election Commission and the senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation, and I was able to sit just slightly behind him while attending a White House deregulation event hosted by the president, and he has an aura of excellence there. Hans, thank you for agreeing to be on the Thrive Time Show, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, could you just share with us, because I don't think when you achieve the level of success you have or the level of influence that you now are able to wield, I think people think that idea is unapproachable. And I know many people right now are wanting to get involved in politics and protecting the American way of life. Where did you come from? What was your life like growing up as a young guy?
Well, despite my name, I actually grew up in North Alabama, but I got the name from my parents. I'm first generation American. My mother was German. She actually grew up in Nazi Germany. My father was Russian, escaped the communists twice, first from Russia, then Yugoslavia when Tito and the communists took over there. They actually met in a refugee camp in the American occupied sector of Germany in 1946.
They met in a refugee camp?
They met in a refugee camp.
Wow.
That's right. And emigrated here, and we ended up in Alabama, where I've got a big family. There are 5 kids in the family, but I went to law school, became a lawyer, and then I started getting involved in election issues in the 1990s. Down at the county government level, and then eventually ended up at the Justice Department and in Washington.
Did you have a key mentor or particular book that inspired you, where you think back in your career and you go, you know, that book, or that guy, or that woman, or was there some mentor or a book that really ignited a passion, or was it your parents sharing with you the horrors of living under the tyrannical Nazi Germany?
It was my parents, you know, because look, during the day, I was just a regular American kid, you know, out playing in the neighborhood and playing baseball and things like that. But when I would go home at night, often at dinner time, my parents would tell me stories about what it was like living under a terrible dictatorship. And they really made me realize how important our ability to vote is.
Come on.
And how we've got to be eternally vigilant to make sure that right to vote is not taken away, and that our elections are fair and free.
When did you first feel like you were gaining traction with your career, where you thought, you know what, I'm actually getting some momentum going here? I might actually at some point be able to make a difference?
It was probably in the late 1990s and the start of the Bush administration in 2001, when, you know, I had been writing and talking about election reform for quite a while. You know, I'd recommended, for example, that the state of Georgia, I was living in Atlanta at the time, ought to pass a voter ID law just as a basic reform measure. And in 2001, I actually got hired by the U.S. Justice Department to work on election reform issues like that.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to I have one more question I want to hit on, but then I want to hop right into the news of the day because I plan on releasing the show as ASAP. You served as a former member of the Federal Election Commission.
That's right.
And now you're the senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation. So I'd love for you to explain, what did you do as the former member of the Federal Election Commission, and then what do you do now as the senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation?
Well, the Federal Election Commission is the independent federal agency that was set up by Congress through legislation in the 1970s. And their job is to enforce the federal law that governs the financing of federal campaigns. So there are rules, on how folks running for Congress and running for the presidency can raise money and who they can raise it from and how they can spend it. And the FEC's job is to enforce those rules and to collect from all of the candidates all their financial disclosures on who they're raising money from and how they're spending it. I was there for 2 years, and I went to the Heritage Foundation. And what I do there is I manage the Heritage Foundation's election law reform initiative. And the purpose of that project is to try to push common sense reforms to address the vulnerabilities that we have in our election system.
So let's talk about this for a second. The president, I don't think anybody in Washington, and I could be incorrect here, but I don't think anybody in Washington thought that President Trump would happen. I mean, this guy hasn't been a governor. He hasn't played in the political deep state, deep swamp. He hasn't participated in that. What did you initially think when President Trump won the election? Were you thinking, uh-oh? Were you thinking, hey, this is going to be a blasty blast? Did you think, man, this is going to be crazy? I mean, how did you respond to seeing President Trump elected to be our president?
Well, it was unusual in recent history, as you know. It's the first time in a very long time that someone, who hadn't been a prior politician, a member of Congress, a governor, getting elected to office. I'll tell you, I was actually very hopeful because, as a businessman, he had to deal directly with, for example, the red tape of government regulations. And I think he understood how much that restricted our economy and the ability of our economy to grow and provide good wages for people. So I was actually hopeful that when he was elected, that he would understand that one of the most important things any president could do is cut down on restrictive government red tape and government regulations. Do you live in D.C.? Is that where you live and work? Well, I work in D.C., but I live in Virginia, outside of the District of Columbia. Got it. Okay. Well, I'm gonna. I want to get your take because you're on the ground, so to speak. I mean, you're every day. You're in either in D.C. or working in D.C., commenting on D.C., researching D.C. Some really big stuff has been happening in the last 48 hours. But we'll start with this. President Donald J. Trump decided to nominate Judge Barrett to be our next Supreme Court justice. Right. And I want to ask you a little background on this. Are you familiar with the Kim Clement? Have you ever heard of Kim Clement? I can't say I have. No. I encourage you to check out Kim Clement on YouTube. It'll blow your mind. But this is one of these prophetic Christian guys who came out and said that that Donald J. Trump will become president back in 2007. And then he was talking about how President Trump would nominate a Supreme Court justice that would just be like a dream for conservatives. And so I'm not super familiar with Kim Clement until the last 6 months or so, but everything he keeps saying keeps happening. So I'm going, okay, I like this. Well, she gets up here and she's doing these hearings. And my understanding is the hearings are kind of a newer thing in the history of our country. I mean, we've only been having hearings for Supreme Court justices for, less than 30 years? Or correct me if I'm wrong. How long have hearings, the drawn-out hearings, been a normal part of the process of nominating a Supreme Court justice and then ultimately approving this person? Well, the first hearing was in the mid-1920s, but then they didn't really have hearings until the 50s. But even then, they were just perfunctory. Okay. They were very perfunctory hearings. It was only in the last 30 years that we have gotten into these extensive hearings that not only have the nominee, but have all these witnesses coming in to testify either in support of or against. I mean, it's really turned almost into a kangaroo type court. Yeah. for political partisan reasons that I think is very, unfortunately, inappropriate.
Now, Jason, I want to get your take on this. Jason's the co-host here, and I want to get your take on this here, Hans, since you're our featured guest. Senator Durbin, okay, he decided to lecture Judge Barrett on originalism. So I'm going to cue up this audio real quick, and I'd just love to get and if you could limit your laughter to whatever you want to do. You're the guest. You can laugh as much as you want. But I just want you to listen to this little 2-minute clip as Judge Barrett responds to Senator Dick Durbin talking to her. And I'm not sure. I'll just call this the jackassery of Senator Dick Durbin is on display. Let me hit play here.
What troubles me is this. You style yourself an originalist, textualist, factualist, whatever the term is, which means you go right to the words and try to understand the words and their original meaning. And so if I change Senator Feinstein's question and didn't ask you whether the president has the authority to unilaterally delay a general election, asked you instead, does the president have the authority to unilaterally deny the right to vote to any person based on their race? What would your answer be?
Well, Senator, obviously there are many laws in effect, including the Equal Protection Clause, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, including the 15th Amendment, which protects the right to vote against discrimination based on race. And so there's a principle in constitutional law called external constraints. And even if one evaluates what the authority a branch might have to act, there are external constraints that press in from other parts of the Constitution. Here, it would be the 14th and 15th Amendments.
Well, of course it would. The 15th Amendment, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race. For an originalist and a textualist, that is clear text as I see it. But when asked whether or not the president has any authority to unilaterally deny that right to vote for a person based on race or even gender, are you saying you can't answer that question?
Senator, I just referenced the 14th and 15th Amendments, the same one that you just repeated back to me, that do prohibit discrimination on the basis of race in voting. So as I said, I don't know how else I can say it, the Constitution contains provisions that prohibit discrimination on the basis of race in voting.
But whether a president can unilaterally deny, you're not going to answer yes or no.
Well, Senator, you've asked a couple different questions about what the president might be able to unilaterally do, and I think that I really can't say anything more than I'm not going to answer hypotheticals.
It strains originalism. If the clear wording of the Constitution establishes a right and you will not acknowledge it.
Well, Senator, it would strain the canons of conduct, which don't permit me to offer off-the-cuff reactions or any opinions outside of the judicial decision-making process. It would strain Article 3, which prevents me from deciding legal issues outside the context of cases and controversies, and as Justice Ginsburg said, it would display disregard for the whole judicial process.
Oh, snap. Unbelievable. So I would just love to get your comments on this. Hans, I don't know if you'd heard that yet, but I mean, wow. She's putting on a laser show with a side of stoicism, and then she's quoting the extremely liberal justice that she's replacing with grace and proper context. How do you process that? I mean, that was a laser show.
Well, it just goes to show how much smarter and frankly better informed she is than Dick Durbin. And I say that actually, I don't know if you realize this, but when I was nominated for the Federal Election Commission to be a commissioner there, I had to appear for a hearing just like this, and Dick Durbin was on it.
Oh, boy.
And he started asking me all these questions about the Voting Rights Act and the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act, because I used to work at the Justice Department. And he didn't know what he was talking about. He was trying to lecture me on what the Voting Rights Act meant, and he clearly had no idea what he was talking about. And I had spent years enforcing that law that he was trying to lecture me on. And that's obviously what's going on here, too.
Now, this is another fun one, a little laser show here for you. Joe Biden was recently asked if he's going to stack the Supreme Court if he's elected. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. but I don't think I am. He said that Joe Biden responded by saying the American people don't deserve to know or don't need to know until after he's elected. But once he's elected, we're going to know. So please explain to me, can you please explain to me what's going on inside Joe Biden's head and how you process what his response was? He's asked directly, are you going to stack the Supreme Court? And then he tells you he's not going to tell you until after he's elected. Can you please explain what's going on in his cranium?
No, I can't do that. And I do think that the American people deserve to know that, because any proposals, frankly, by anyone in Washington, whether it's Joe Biden or members of the Senate or elsewhere, to add more justices to the court, to stack the court, is evidence that they want the court to engage in partisanship. And I mean, that's the only reason they want to do that. And I also think that, look, both candidates really should put out a list of potential folks that they would consider for the court. Trump has done that. I think Biden should do that, because that is an important consideration people should take into account when they're making their decision in the election, because of the fact that the Supreme Court has so much influence today in our society. Far too much, because the court has gone far beyond what it's supposed to do. But that's an unfortunate fact today.
Now, the Democrats are attempting to do all different kinds of things with the election this year. And Jason, I want to get your take on this, because how old, I guess President Obama, when he won his first term, he got 99% of the black vote.
Yep.
As a guy who's not white, is that shocking to you?
No, not at all. Because I remember I was too young to vote in his first term.
Yeah.
But I was indoctrinated and tricked into voting for him for his second term, because that's what I was told to do based on how I looked.
Okay, so and then the second time Obama ran, he didn't get 99% of the black vote, but he did get a vast majority in the upper 90 percentile. And President Trump won the election with 8%, is what I've read, 8% of the black vote. He won the election in 2016 with 8% of the black vote. Now, I don't know a ton of black people. I only know some of my good friends who happen to be black. So, my friend Eugene or my wife's best friend Sharita, they happen to be black. What percentage, Jason, of America do you think has changed, of the black America or non-white America, do you think, just from your experience, do you think has changed from being a 100% Democrat supporter to now being open to voting Trump? Because, again, he won with 8% of the vote. People I know are telling me they're voting for Trump, people of color, but that's probably a confirmation bias. What are your thoughts on that, Jason?
Just from what I've seen, like the actual valid proof, just tidal waves of the black community, the Latino community are moving over to more of the Trump side. I would say even more so, more libertarian, because they've realized that their liberal and democratic governments have been failing them this entire time.
When did you switch teams?
This would have been definitely for sure the beginning of this year, but I was on my way out towards the tail end of last year.
So there weren't Jack Brewers, there weren't Candace Owens, there wasn't the outspoken Herschel Walker, there wasn't Hans. I want to get your take on this. Do you have any data, any polling? Are you seeing anything? What percentage of the black vote has switched to Trump? Because again, we know he won with 8%, and Obama needed 99% of the black vote to win. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Do you have any comments on that?
No, I don't really have any polling data or other data about this, but I mean, it's very interesting when you think about it that in the last 4 years, both black unemployment and Hispanic unemployment reached the lowest levels in the entire time it's been recorded.
Yep.
And, that kind of economic news, I think, is something that I'm sure people will think about when they're going into the polling booth, particularly when they compare it to what the data was during the Obama administration.
And this is why we as in the Democrats don't want people to go into the booth. So now they're saying, no, just mail it in. No, just mail it in. So I'd like for you to talk about this, Hans, because you know enough history to know about Adolf Hitler, Venezuela, Cuba, other people that decided to throw their votes and do the crazy things that tyrannical leaders do, tyrannical dictators do. What is the Democrat Party trying to do here with this election and the mail-in voter stuff? Let's go explain that in a way that the average listener can understand, assuming they know nothing about the voter fraud that the Democrats are committing.
Well, there's this big push from the left to try to force states to have everyone vote by mail, and there's huge problems with that. First of all, the chances of your ballot being rejected go up if you vote by mail. It's because voters make mistakes. They forget to sign a ballot. They don't provide all the information. The U.S. Postal Service might not deliver it in time, or they might forget to postmark it.
Right.
But at the same time that they've been pushing for everyone to vote by mail, they've launched lawsuits all over the country in which they're getting federal judges to say that states can't enforce the basic security protocols that states have put in place to try to stop fraud in the absentee balloting process. And to give you a quick example of this, in South Carolina, for example, they filed a lawsuit saying the state should not be allowed to enforce its witness signature requirement. Because, when you sign the absentee ballot, you got to have a witness to sign it.
Correct.
Also, to authenticate that you, the voter, actually did it. Similar lawsuit was filed in Alabama to not only get rid of the witness signature requirement, but to not allow the state to enforce its voter ID requirement. At the same time, these lawsuits are saying, you should extend the deadline for the receipt of absentee ballots until after election day.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and in some places, judges, it's usually liberal judges, are saying, and by the way, we're going to extend the deadline, and election officials, you have to count the ballot even if there's no postmark on it, which means that you don't know whether the ballots were actually voted after Election Day.
It's unbelievable.
They're also in those lawsuits asking for judges to override state laws that ban vote harvesting. That means that they want to be able to send their party activists, campaign staffers, political consultants to people's homes.
Ilhan Omar, 5th Congressional District there in Minnesota, the great state of Minnesota. The Project Veritas came out and did a very, very nice expose documentary exposing the voter fraud, where they're straight up running around with cash, giving cash to people, saying, hey, you want some cash? Yeah, I want some cash. Here, let me give you cash. I just need you to fill out this go ahead and fill out the ballot, and I'll give you some cash.
Right.
And this is happening at scale, and it's being funded by the most nefarious, anti-American, George Soros-esque sources. I got 3 final questions for you because I want to respect your time, and they're questions that if I've taken it too far and you hang up, I know then that it was a bad question. But Dr. Richard Bartlett is a friend of mine. He's also a medical doctor. He was a former top advisor for Governor Perry of Texas for 7 consecutive years. And if you're not familiar with him, I'm not going to paint you into a corner with a question. But he has treated over 1,000 COVID-19 patients with 0 deaths. My good friend, Dr. Jim Meehan, has treated COVID-19 patients with 0 deaths. If you have 1,000 wins and 0 losses, you would think that this is front page news, good news. Woo, we're beating the virus. And so Dr. Bartlett's been on Newsmax, One American News. He's been on this program. He's been on a lot of media outlets. But the mainstream media simply will not cover the fact that he's treating people with budesonide. Budesonide, which is an FDA-approved drug, and a Z-Pak. No deaths. Why will the media simply not cover treatments, or even the president's treatment where he got better in 2 days or 4 days? I mean, why will the mainstream media simply not cover treatments for COVID-19?
Look, there's a lot of things, as you know, the mainstream media won't cover. In what we've been talking about, for example, they try not to cover incidents of election fraud.
Yep.
I just published an article at the Daily Signal about all these recent arrests and criminal charges that have gotten hardly any publicity because people apparently just don't want to cover it.
Well, now you have been a very dangerous, very crazy social media guy recently because you just posted on your Twitter feed, and I just saw you do it, that Hunter Biden's story is being blocked largely from Facebook. The New York Post article. In Hunter Biden, if you watch the documentary Riding the Dragon, produced by the Blaze Network, or you do any research at all, you can see Hunter Biden is involved in billions of dollars of Chinese investment. And, he's involved in a lot of things right now. Could you comment on Hunter Biden and Biden's connection to communist China, the Biden family?
Well, look, there's a lot of evidence out there that he received money from both folks in Russia and in China while his father was vice president and while his father was in charge of relations with both those countries. And I find it astonishing that when the New York Post publishes an article about this, they are basically censored by not just Facebook, but also apparently Twitter is now censoring them, which indicates that these social media platforms are directly intervening in a federal election and are trying to cover up information coming out about one of the candidates. They should not be doing that. And that's something that I think we need to take into account. They've got certain federal laws that are giving them the ability to do that, and I think those need to be reconsidered.
Now, Hans, I now want to give you the mic to say whatever you want to say to the Thrive Nation out there. We've got about 500,000 listeners that are action-oriented. They want to do something. Tell us, what do you want to say to the listeners before you drop the mic?
Well, the biggest thing I would tell folks is, look, right now election officials at the county and state level are making decisions on, are they going to have polling places open, or are they going to force everybody to vote by mail? Make your voices heard. Demand your right to be able to vote in person and put your ballot into the ballot box so you know it'll be counted. And don't let them tell you that they can't have polling places open. They can. All they got to do is have the same kind of safety protocols in place that we see when we go to the grocery store or the pharmacy.
Hans, you are a great American treasure. Thank you for allowing me to sit within 6 feet. I was probably 5 feet away from you during the time where people were really freaked out about COVID. I stuck my chair to just get closer to your aura there. So I was probably within 4 feet of you on the White House lawn. Thank you so much. Thank you for your diligent reporting of the facts. Where can people follow you or learn more about you, sir?
Just go to heritage.org, heritage.org. In addition to me, you can take a look at our election fraud database, which has proven cases of fraud from all over the country.
Brother, you're a great American. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!
There have always been people who don't believe. They don't believe in hard work. They don't believe in responsibility. Ultimately, they don't believe in themselves. They believe in shortcuts, in luck. They believe that outside circumstances control who succeeds and who doesn't. It's just the luck of the draw. But you are not one of these people. You believe that no matter what your circumstances tell you, success is still possible. And you accept this responsibility because you want to achieve something great. You're hungry for it. You chase it from the moment your eyes open in the early morning. You chase it into all hours of the night when others have given up, when others have said that it couldn't be done. You've kept pushing because you believe that success is not a game of chance. Success is a choice that you make every single day. That's what you believe.
Discover the world's most affordable and effective business school today at thrivetimeshow.com.